A long time ago, the Armageddon 2 used to be a pretty average ship, right up until the moment when the ship has received +1 extra low slots. It used to have only 5 low slots, but now it has 6, and that has significantly improved the tank of this ship, and it also can technically improve its DPS if you are using the drone damage amplifiers. And of course, the implants have improved the ship significantly, especially the DPS part with the drone bombs, but you can also improve the tank part if you use the thermal circulation. Now, the stats of this ship have remained generally the same. The Armageddon is mostly a support ship with Nosferatus and neutralizers, but it also can serve as a DPS ship. It should have a very nice drone DPS output. As you all know, drones are currently one of the most, surprisingly one of the most overpowered weapons, especially with the drone bombs. After all, you can unleash like, let's say 10,000 DPS in seconds, and that 10,000 DPS can be translated in a lot of alpha, especially with the effect of the drone bombs, and I'll show you that in this video. Primarily a armor tank, but in some cases and in some rare instances the Armageddon can also be used as a shield tank. Now this is a old build, a old tank build. In the high slots you can use any weapon system that you like. I personally prefer to use missiles on my drone boats, but you can use turrets or even energy weapons. In most cases I prefer to use missiles or projectile turrets, weapons that don't use energy. In the menu slots, dual Nosferatus, a web and a scrambler, and here we have drones. Now drones have been changed recently, and all of the drones have different stats. Some have better speed, some have better DPS, and that allows us to play around with the drones in order to get the best possible performance for the given moment or for the given situation. Now we can technically use one Nosferatu and one neutralizer, or dual Nosferatus and one neutralizer. This ship is a E-war ship, a electronic warfare ship, and it is a fantastic addition to a fleet, fantastic for solo as well, and surprisingly a very, I would say a very versatile ship. Now as for the nanocores, you have a lot of nanocores to choose from. I picked the Neon Rain core for this video just because I thought that it looks awesome. I love the aesthetics of this nanocore, and in order not to affect the DPS and stats too much, I did not upgrade the core, and I just picked the extra warp speed stats so that the DPS and tank of this ship remains the same as it was by default. It will just warp a bit faster, and that is not going to be a big problem. Now here you can also take a look at some of the other nanocores. You can pick between extra tank, in this case armor tank, or extra drone damage. Since this is a drone boat, I prefer that you go with extra drone DPS, especially if you have the bombarding implant, which I believe most of you guys already have by now. And even level 15, level 30, I mean level 15 is still like way too strong for what it should be. As you all know, bombarding implant can yeet ships in seconds, so yeah, this ship is one of those ships that can do that, and it also has some electronic warfare capabilities that makes it even more interesting, and in some cases even more lethal. Now as for the rigs, I will show you 3 different builds: the expensive tank one, the cheap tank, and the DPS build for the Armageddon. Now these rigs are ancient. I had these rigs for a while now, and technically you can use it, but I don't really recommend that you use integration rigs on the normal battleships. You can use the tank rigs on the tank battleships like the Abaddon, Rock, Hyperion. They can really benefit from the integrations, but the DPS E-war battleships will work really well even with cheap rigs. I mean, this is one of the ships where the difference between the more expensive and the cheap build is literally non-existent, as you are going to see later. So for this ship I wouldn't go with integrations, because it's just overkill, and the overall effect in the end is literally almost non-existent. Although you can get some extra repair, but the Armageddon doesn't really need that. After all, it is a E-war ship, so electronic warfare ships usually have support of other boats nearby because they are support ships themselves. So first I'll take a look at the thermal circulation implant, and as for the general units, well, you can go with Nosferatu neutralizer units, you can also go with the Afterburner or Micro Object units. You have a lot of to choose from, and I'll just leave that up to you. Use the units that your ship will benefit the most from. In my case, I think I'll just go with extra armor repair and probably a Nosferatu unit because that's what I'm going to use now. I will use only 2 units because it will simulate the implant being a level 15. I wish I could downgrade the implant, but I can't, unfortunately, so I'm stuck with what I have. But I would love to have the option to downgrade the implant so that I can actually use and show you the difference between level 15, 30 and 45. But, you know, perhaps in the future we will be able to do that. Now let me undock and let me show you the magic of the level 15 thermal circulation. Now the thermal circulation implants undoubtedly one of my favorite implants, mostly favorite because it has a passive effect that doesn't break the game too much, and it still is really solid all around. It gives you extra 20% armor resistance on all damage types. The implant works basically on all armor tanks, so any armor tank ship that you have can use this implant for extra tank. I really recommend that you use this implant for the tanky battleships like the Abaddon, Hyperion, and of course other armor tanks, and in this case it gave me some very nice stats. This is a very tanky Armageddon 2, 416,000 hit points. Now I say very tanky because drone boats usually have a bit less hit points than the ordinary ships, and I think that's a balancing factor. After all, the drone boats need to have extra storage inside in order to fit the drones, so basically they have drone base, large cargo holds, and all that does impact the overall hit points because there is less metal inside of these ships, and I find that a very nice touch to the game. Okay, now besides the triple adaptive build, you can use 1 damage control, and you can also use triple armor repairs. You can use 1 reactive instead of the damage control. You have a lot of options here, but in most cases I prefer to have dual adaptives, at least a damage control against the barrage implant or against other drone bombs, or it also works with the reactive hardener because most hunters that have the drone bomb implant don't really account for the yellow hardener, so they do only 1 damage type. So you can technically tank the drone bombs with the 1 yellow if they use the same drones, but if they use like a bunch of different drones, then it's going to be a bit rough to tank, but you should still have some decent resistance in order to withstand a lot of incoming bomb DPS. But with the damage control you can easily tank the drone bombs. That's why I like the damage control. It's one of the most useful modules nowadays, and I wish that we had the old school damage control where you get plus 50% extra resistance upon activating it. The old school damage control is the active damage control, which affects shield, armor and hull. That has been changed in EVE Online a long time ago, and that module doesn't really exist in that form, but would be nice if we had that in this game.
Undocking.
Would definitely make the damage control the more requested and one of the more demanded items on the market. Okay, now next build. This is the build with triple adaptives, 1 damage control and 1 armor repair. Now usually I like to have at least 2 armor repairs on my armor tank ships because 1 armor repair usually doesn't have enough armor repair in order to sustain a proper active tank, but in some cases, in a 1v1 for example, if you have a really tanky ship and if you counter the enemy type and weapon type easily, then 1 armor repair should be more than enough, and you get some pretty nasty resistances on this thing. Triple adaptives, damage control and dual armor repairs. This is a kind of a brick tank, but I would say always use at least 1 Afterburner or a micro overdrive. The Armageddon 2 isn't really that slow, it's actually quite speedy, and the speed is one of the interesting traits of this ship. So you can easily take advantage of that, and here you can use dual Nosferatus and a neutralizer, or you can also use dual neutralizers and one Nosferatu. Again, it depends on the purpose that you want to do with what to do with the ship. What do you want to do with the boat? And now let me quickly, let me show you the cheaper option, and let me show you that there is literally there is not any literal difference between the integrations and the normal rigs. Well, at least on this ship. On some of the other tanky ships, the difference is going to be quite significant. Okay, now this ship has some very nice armor resistance by default. This is with the thermal circulation, so 60, 52, 50, 45 and 42. Honestly, for a ship that has no rigs at the moment, this is some really good default stats. Of course, there's the thermal circulation included, but it's still a very solid number. Now I'll cover the holes. Basically, I will cover explosive, kinetic, and the third rig can enhance the armor volume, can also enhance the performance of the armor repairs with the nanobot accelerators or the 3-mark armor pump. You basically can use any other third rig that you want. You can also combine 2 normal rigs and 1 integration if you really like, but in most cases there is going to be very little to no difference. So in this case, I will go and just add the anti-explosive, anti-kinetic, 62, 52, 67 and 65. Now I have a thermal hull, which I can easily cover with a thermal rig, and I'll just go and slap a thermal rig on top of the current setup. And we got some pretty good default stats. This is called, by the way, in station. And honestly, 250,000 hit points, 63, 71, 67 and 66 is pretty solid. It's actually really solid, and I'm very happy with the current tank. Now let me undock and let me show you the active stats. You will see that the overall hit points in the end are about the same. I think the difference is like 10 to 5,000 hit points when everything is active or something like that, which is kind of funny. Again, literally like no difference between the integrations and between the normal rigs, which is good news, because it means that you can get fantastic performance without breaking the budget on this ship. And 455,000 hit points, again very little difference, 84, 88, 86 and 85%. I am extremely happy with the current result. It's capacitor stable, and yeah, quite the tanky little boat. And with the damage control, now it has 1.3 million hit points, which is again almost non-existent difference between the integration setup and with the cheap setup, which I really do like. Okay, now with the DPS part. Against battleships, I will go with torpedo launchers. You can technically use the torpedo launchers against battlecruisers, but nothing smaller than a battlecruiser, because your damage will not be applied. Instead of the Nosferatus, you can use neutralizers, and I actually recommend that you use neutralizers. Take advantage of the neutralizer buff that has been released recently. I thought only capital neutralizers were buffed. Well, no. All neutralizers were buffed. Small, medium, large, all of them have a much nastier effect on enemy ships. And as for the drones, always make sure that the beehive is full, because you never know when you have to replace the drones. And this ship has a very nice drone hold, so we can basically add a lot of drones. Add small, medium and large drones. Small and medium drones against frigates and cruisers. The large drones can be used against battlecruisers and battleships, although the medium drones can also be used against the battlecruisers as well. It really depends on the speed of the target and not on the size of the target. And with this build, I'll just go and use the good old overpowered broken drone bombs. I love and hate this implant at the same time. I hate it because it's so broken and busted, and the developers haven't touched it for months. For some odd reason, I don't know why. And I love it because it is very fun to use. But as I'm real with you, I tell you things as they are. Even if I were to use this implant actively, I want it nerfed, and that's not going to change. I want balance, and there is just full stop on that. Now, since this ship has like 3 different drone types, I'll just show you the DPS that you can expect from this ship with the medium and large drones. The DPS between small and medium drones is about, well, I would say, a little different, but it will still give some absolutely insane stats, which is more than enough to blow up any frigate or any cruiser. You can literally blow up cruisers with the light drones. That's how silly the implant is. But I believe it will be nerfed. I've started to cover it a lot more actively lately, and since the developers seem to be watching what I'm doing here, I expect the drum bomb implant to be nerfed. So yeah, watch it happen. At one point, it will happen probably very soon. So this is the DPS build, the PvP build that I will use. 2 neutralizers, 1 web, 1 scrambler, triple damage mods, an adaptive hardener, damage stone, and a micro warp drive. A default build that I use on most of my PvP ships. It has fantastic DPS output, it has fantastic electronic warfare capabilities, and it does offer a fantastic tank, which is going to help a lot in combat. The idea behind this build is to blow up the target before the target blows up you. The only real counter to this would be a really tanky battleship. A really tanky ship can withstand a build like this, so you really have to know to pick the target that you can take. Be careful around rocks, be careful around Abaddons, be careful around ships that have very, very high natural shield or armor resistance. They can withstand the bombarding plant, even with the ridiculously crazy DPS. So, the DPS, well, 2713.01, 2154.66 DPS from the drones, which is with the light drones, and that goes total for about 6.6 thousand DPS with the bombard implant active. So you will still get some really good DPS with the medium drones, and again, there is no cruiser or frigate that can tank 6.6 thousand drone DPS, and the drones are fast, so yeah, they will blow up any small targets basically within seconds. A very, very nasty combination.
Undocking.
Now let me quickly change the drones and let me show you the performance of the big boys, of the big old drones. And I'll show you also a build and a setup that I use to counter a yellow hardener. I mostly use a build like that on my Stratios when I go and engage let's say a battlecruiser or cruiser that has a yellow hardener. 2794.84 or 2223.49 DPS. That gets tripled with the drum bomb implant, so yeah, we are now well over 9,000 total DPS, to be more accurate 9.6 thousand DPS. And when all the damage mods are active, we have about 12,000 DPS total, which is, you know, pretty good. 11,980 DPS, about that number. So yeah, very close to the rattlesnake, but still not even close to the Nestor. The Nestor is known to have the craziest DPS output with the bombarding plant. With a proper build, with a proper, let's say, channel unit layout, the Nestor can hit 20,000 DPS, which, you know, is a little bit too much, but again, I expect it to be nerfed. And I'm very happy to announce that they actually have improved the drone change speed. Now, I don't wait 8 years for the drones to change. It feels a bit faster, but, you know, it's still a bit slow, so yeah. That's one thing that I noticed that happened in one of the recent updates. And this is the build, and this is the drone layout that I have on the Stratios. Basically all different types of drones that do different damage type, and that way I can counter a yellow hardener easily. Basically, the yellow hardener, when impacted by several different damage types, loses its effect, and this is one way how to deal more damage to the tanky targets. Now, since all drones have different DPS outputs now and different performances, the overall total DPS will be a little bit lower, but the overall total DPS will be almost the same. you get about 11,000 DPS, which is still a lot. And I don't think that many of you will notice the small, like 800 to 1000 DPS difference with the Dromos, because most ships will just get torn to shreds in seconds anyway. So yeah, 1000 DPS up or down might not be much of an impact. And you also can go full glass. This is a build that I usually use on the Macariel with the barrage implant, just to hit the target as quick as possible. But I felt like a bit naked with that build lately, so I usually run one adaptive and a damage troll. It helps a lot to be frankly real with you. It helps a lot to reduce the stress when you get shot by something while shooting at the target. So the adaptive definitely helps a lot. And now the DPS will be a bit higher. I should get about 12,500 DPS with this current build with the offense ogre drones. Although your DPS, if you're using the Mark 9 drones, will be a bit lower. The offensive drones have like offensive drones. Yeah, I know, sounds kind of weird, but the offense drones have the highest DPS output, but they do thermal, so a yellow hardener can easily counter that. That's why I combine multiple drones, just to counter the yellow hardener in case they use the yellow hardener. And I picked that trick from my friend, who is also flying the Stratius with the bombarding plant, and he is one of the best players that I know in the game. Okay, well, let's take a look at the maximum DPS. 6,300 DPS with the bombarding plant active, which is cold DPS, by the way. Very good cold DPS, extremely high alpha damage, which always very good in PvP. Since this is a PvP build, that's why it's very good for that purpose. With the high DPS drones, with the ogres, now it's about the same. 6.7 thousand DPS, 300 DPS difference, 350 DPS difference. It's fine. That's still ridiculously high. And someone asked me how much DPS would I nerf. Well, if I were to be real with you, I would minus 8 to 90% DPS on all implants. That's what I would do. I would just nerf all the things to the ground, and I'd make most of that passive. I would definitely remove the active effect of the implants. Why? Well, because the active implants definitely break the game a bit more than if, let's say, they were passive. But the implants are the way they are, and the only thing that I can see happening is them getting nerfed. The overall DPS on all implants will gradually go down. That's what's been the trend for the last couple months. Most of the high DPS implants, minus the drum bombs, have been nerfed by 50% already, based on the original numbers that we had a long time ago. And the active DPS, well, it's good. It's still really good. I mean, you will definitely see that this 13,000 DPS is going to do some damage. About the same DPS as the Rattlesnake, but the Rattlesnake has 7 low slots, and the Rattlesnake can use this build, and it still can have a fantastic shield tank. And this is the advantage of the Rattlesnake. It has a fantastic shield tank, a bonus on shield tank, and it has 7 low slots. It can combine extremely good DPS, and it can also have about 70-80% resistance with only 2 adaptive, or 1 adaptive harder plus 1 damage control. Okay, and with this build to counter the yellow hardener, you get also fantastic DPS, but a little bit lower, because now every drone has its own DPS, and all drones have different damage outputs, so the overall total DPS will be different. In this case, lower, because the ogre have the maximum DPS. The lowest DPS comes from the berserkers, but the berserkers are the fastest, and then you also have the wasps, and then you have the predator also have very interesting, unique stats. Okay, well, now speaking of dual adaptives, this is the build that I was talking about. You can get some very nice armor resistance with this build. If tank is a problem, and if you worry about the tank, then that's the way to go. If you're worrying about the drone speed, then you can do something like this. and have the supervision drone navigation computer will increase the drone speed quite a bit, and it should help at catching those pesky interceptors or frigates that can be annoying, but you don't even have to use them actively. Just kill their capacitor with the neutralizers. Don't forget, you have amazing electronic warfare capabilities on the Armageddon, and the neutralizer will be your main defensive weapon against smaller boats that can be problematic. And a PvE build is something like this. It is capacitor stable. It is capacitor stable even without the Nosferatu, so you can use triple webs, or basically you can use any other module instead of the Nosferatu, but just to be safe, the Nosferatu is going to be placed there. And quad damage amplifiers, a armor repairer and adaptive armor hardener, rapid missiles, and again very cheap rigs. And this is a I say very cheap build because in most cases you will not be using the Predator webs. I use the Predator webs because I don't have any other webs in the station, so I have to use what I have. And let's take this boat for a spin. Now you can technically make the Armageddon a mini Balgorn, and you can actually get the same camouflage as the Balgorn. This is where the joke came from, that the Balgorn is a Armageddon with a Blood Raider nanocore. I remember the time when the Balgorn used to be like the scariest boat in the game. That's when I used to fly it, and I had so much fun with it. But unfortunately, the Balgorn is not what it used to be, and in most cases nowadays, I would probably pick the Armageddon for Ivor because it has a better tank. It doesn't have the vast Nosferatu neutralizer performance, but it is much cheaper, and cost and price is definitely a big factor that I always include, and a lot of other players also include. So a cheap version of the Balgorn, a easy to replace version of Balgorn with a bit lower performance, but you know, it's still really good, is the Armageddon. And of course, the Balgorn can't use the bombarding plant because it has no bonus on drones, while this thing can. And if we would to match up a DPS Balgorn versus a DPS Armageddon 2, both using the respective implants, the Armageddon would break that Balgorn to bits, because the Balgorn just can't have a good tank. Well, at least when I say good tank, a tank that can easily tank those nasty implants. Technically you can, but you will lose DPS, and a counter to this would be a Balgorn with a damage control and triple adaptives. That would be the counter to a build like this. But if you were to match up two ships, let's say DPS fit versus DPS build, then the Armageddon 2 would just tear the Balgorn to bits with the drone bombs, because the Balgorn can have about 10,000 DPS with lasers, and lasers, we all know, do much less damage on armor than shield, so your DPS on the armor will definitely drop significantly. Meanwhile, drones just eat shields, eat armors, eat hulls. It doesn't matter for the drones, they just eat everything for breakfast. And yeah, that's one big difference. Of course, there's a lot of other things to include as well, so it's not really as black and white as I'm portraying it to be, but in most cases the bombarding plants will wreck the other ship. And well, that's just where things are at the moment. That's the bombarding plant, and hopefully, I mean, I know the developers are watching. I know they're watching. I'm 100% sure they're listening and watching. I have a lot of proof to back that up, but I'm not really sure how much I am allowed to say on that topic. But I'll just, you know, say that I know they're watching, and I know that they did make some adjustments based on what I said here and based on the feedback that you guys have sent me as well, because I usually get the feedback, I collect it, and I just, you know, when the time comes, I just send that to them. And they do listen. They do listen when the players are not screaming into their ears. I mean, I know if someone would to scream in my ear, I wouldn't listen. But you know, very interested to see what happens to the drum bomb implant, and very curious to know about some of the other implants that get released. I'm a little bit worried about the lightweight chip implant. A little bit worried, because if it is anywhere near what the bombs are currently, oh man, you know, I'll just laugh. I mean, honestly, I'll just laugh. I'll sit and laugh if the lightweight ships break 100,000, 150,000 DPS. I have that feeling, you know, I have that feeling that it's going to be something like that. But again, hope I'm wrong. In most cases, I hope I'm wrong. A lot of players don't get that. They think that I'm always right. No, I'm not always right. I hope I'm not right, because if I'm right, well, yeah, then something is really not right. But back to the good old Armageddon here. You know, back when I flew this thing for the first time, I had a totally different view on PvP, and as the builds changed, as the game changed, I adapted. Back then, I was all for tank, but now, since I started to eat battleships in PvP, also in solo PvP, I found out that the DPS way is also a very nice option. And if you can basically burst down the target in let's say 30 seconds, then you don't really need a tank. Now, that is in low sec. That's about like most cases of low sec PvP. You will find some ships that are going to be able to tank your DPS. So again, you have to be very careful when you are picking your target with a build like this. But most of the ships, as you guys all know, have a horrible build. And one of the main reasons why these builds work and why these builds are so good nowadays is just because a lot of builds out there are not really that good, and that does help a lot at getting these builds to work. Now, of course, let's say if players eventually decide to build properly, then I will probably also change my build in order to counter that. That's basically how you EVE. You always try to be one step ahead of your opponent, and that's going to make a big difference between a win or a fail. I have a bunch of losses, I have a lot of kills, and I've learned a lot over time. I mean, we all still learn. Every day I learn something new, actually, and every day I implement something new into my builds or into my tactics, and that's why I managed to, well, so far at least, I'm actually managing to pull off at least like 10,000 kills, but no losses. At least I haven't lost a ship in like 7, 8 months, 10 months, about that number. I actually have no idea when I lost my last ship. I think it was like in September. It was a Stratus or an Ortus. I remember I was very, well, at the time I was literally like on the brink of quitting the game, not because of the losses, but because of some other things, and I was just eating the ships around. But those 2 losses or that 1 loss back then was literally the last loss I had. So over 8, 9, 10 months, and I'm doing the no death run, by the way. I am forbidden from losing ships until 2024, and I am really serious about completing that. I'll make the best kill death ratio out of any player in the game. Maximum kills, but no losses. That's my goal. That's what that I want to do, and that's what I'm doing. And so far, I think I'm up there. I don't know about any other player that does this no death run. I mean, I invite everyone to actually go and try that out because it's fun. Try to see how many kills you can line up before your ship gets blown up. everything is fair game as long as it's not cheating and as long as it's not, you know, breaking the rules of the game. Which means you can hunt in no-sec, you can camp, you can hunt in no-sec, all counts. And it's a very fun challenge. It's a very fun challenge, and so far I'm doing pretty good. It is April, and let's see, January, February, March, April. Oh, it's the 4th. Actually, no, my apologies. It's March. It's May. It's May. So I have... Oh man, I have like, what? 7 months? 7 months left? Yeah, it's gonna... Well, I managed to go for the first 5 months, so I think I'll manage until January 1st, I hope. I hope I don't mess up. It's a very nice... It's a very fun challenge, honestly. Been very exciting so far. So, how did the Armageddon 2 perform? It performed magnificently. A very, very fun little boat. And if you were thinking about trying this ship out, I would say definitely give it a shot. It is a very unique ship. Combines electronic warfare capabilities, and it combines it basically combines fantastic drone DPS. So with that being said, hope that you guys have enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. It does help a lot. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.